Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Welcome, friends. Thank you for stopping by the Buffet Crampon brand page. We're also simulcasting on the Julius Keilwerth and Buffet Crampon Saxophones page. My name is Matt Vance. I'm the Woodwind product specialist for Buffet Crampon USA. I'm broadcasting live from Jacksonville, Florida, which is the North American headquarters for Buffet Crampon USA and the brands that you see behind me on the wall. We're in the fourth week of our stay-at-home orders for Buffet Crampon USA here in Jacksonville, which means that I've been working from home. And we are also in the fourth edition of our hashtag Together at Home webcast series. And today we're going to be talking about Buffet Crampon saxophones. We're also going to be talking about Julius Keilwerth saxophones. We're going to be comparing the two brands. A lot of people don't realize that Buffet Crampon has both saxophone brands, and they're both fantastic saxophone brands. They're both a little different character and different personalities. And we'll talk about how they're different and what makes each brand so unique in the saxophone world. And we'll also talk about the history of both brands. We'll talk about when Buffet Crampon started making saxophones. It was a lot earlier than probably a lot of you imagine. And we'll also talk about Julius Keilwerth saxophones and how they entered the professional saxophone world in the 1920s. And a lot of history to talk about, a lot of different models to talk about today. We'll go through the student, through the professional saxophones of Buffet Crampon, and we'll also talk about the different professional models that are offered by Julius Keilwerth. So again, I would like to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I hope you all are well, first of all. For many of us, we're entering our fourth or fifth week of quarantine stay-at-home orders, and I think we're all getting a little more used to this way of life. That doesn't mean we necessarily like it, but I think we're adapting to it. I know there are some things that I'm actually enjoying about being home and working from home. I've gotten to practice a lot more, which has been nice. Got to spend a lot more time with my family, which has been terrific. And it's been a challenge maintaining our work schedules at Buffet Crampon USA. But we're excited to be able to continue presenting this webcast series to you and keep your interest up in our different brands and our different instruments, and to talk about some of the different models and different instruments that our brands offer. Along those lines, before I get started discussing our different saxophone brands, I would like to briefly go over the schedule for the webcast that we have up to this point. I'll be joined later this week by my product specialist colleagues, Warren Coos and Declan Lynch. Let's see, our next scheduled webcast under the hashtag Together at Home will be Tuesday. That's April 21st. Declan Lynch is our low brass product specialist, and he'll be talking about the Creation Series trombones. If you're not familiar with those trombones, a professional line of trombones designed in collaboration with American trombone artists Weston Sprott and Denson Paul Pollard of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. They were involved in the line or in the design of the New York series of the Creation Series trombones. And Declan will be talking about those trombones. That'll be Tuesday, April 21st at 2 o'clock Eastern. Declan may also have a special surprise guest stopping by, so you'll want to be able to be sure to tune in for that. That will be on the Antoine Courtois Facebook page. And again, that's Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Next Thursday, Warren Coos will be joining us for the Hans Hoyer Heritage Series Q&A session. Hans Hoyer, of course, one of the most reputable French horn brands in the world. And Warren will be talking about the Heritage Series of the Hans Hoyer French horns. That's Thursday, April 23rd at 2 o'clock. The following week, I'll be back with you on Tuesday, the 28th. I'll be joined by Lori Orr at our New York showroom, and it looks like Lori is joining us this afternoon. Hello, Lori. It's good to see you tuning in. Lori is not only the manager of our New York showroom, Lori also oversees our professional double reed sales for North America. And Lori and I will be talking about Buffet Crampon, Reguta, and Schreiber double reeds. That will be a week from this Tuesday. That's April 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then finally for April, on Thursday, April 30th at 2 p.m., Warren Coos will be back with a discussion of Besson brass and the brass brand British Invasion. You're probably familiar with British brass bands and how popular they've become, not only in North America, but worldwide. And Warren has been heavily involved in the brass band world, in addition to his duties as high brass product specialist for Buffet Crampon USA. And he'll be leading a discussion about Besson brass. Of course, Besson is the name in British brass bands, and that will be on Thursday, April 30th at 2 p.m. Eastern. One other announcement before we get into our discussion this afternoon. The hashtag Together at Home web series will be continuing into May, and we're also already lining up a slate of really interesting topics that will expand beyond the brands that we have been talking about up to this point. We'll get into Powell flutes. We'll get into some of the other brass brands. And I think it'll be really interesting for you to tune in, and I hope you will join us. We should have a schedule announced later this month as far as what programs we'll have for you scheduled for the month of May and which brands we'll be featuring as well. So let's get into talking about saxophones. Let's get into saying hello to Lauren Sevian. Lauren is one of our Buffet Crampon saxophone artists. Of course, she's one of the leading baritone saxophonists in the New York scene. She plays in the Mkx band. She also has a fantastic solo career, and Lauren plays the 400 series baritone saxophone. And Lauren, it's so good of you to join us this afternoon. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any comments or questions you'd like to contribute to the comment thread, that would be fantastic. We would love to hear from you. So, talking about Buffet Crampon and Julius Keilwerth saxophones. What I am always surprised to learn when I talk to people at conferences, at shows, some people are still surprised that Buffet Crampon even makes saxophones. People always associate the brand Buffet Crampon with what? Clarinets. And what we often forget is that Buffet Crampon has been around since 1825. And believe it or not, Buffet Crampon has been making saxophones since 1866. That was something that I learned just recently. I wasn't sure exactly when our brand started making saxophones, but I knew it was one of the first. And actually, Buffet Crampon was the first brand to start making saxophones after Adolphe Sax. So there is a lot of heritage. There's a real legacy with saxophones with Buffet Crampon. And I think it's really fascinating to get into some of the different models and the history of Buffet Crampon saxophones. So what I thought we could do is we could talk a little bit, and I've got some notes here that I'm going to refer to. We could talk about the different models and the different history behind them. The first models from Buffet Crampon actually started in 1866, as I mentioned earlier. They were made until about 1887, and then they shifted over to the Yvette Schaefer model from Buffet Crampon. A lot of people associate Yvette Schaefer with student saxophones or intermediate saxophones, but that name actually was branded with a lot of professional saxophones in the late 1800s. Those models were actually made from 1887 to 1927. And believe it or not, you still see a lot of those saxophones floating around. You'll see them in Woodwind specialty shops, and they're very interesting and very unique instruments. And they actually share a lot of the design elements and a lot of the basic structure from the Adolphe Sax instruments from the mid-1800s. After that, we got into the Yvette models, we got into the Apogee models and the Powell models, where Buffet saxophones, Buffet Crampon saxophones, really made their mark, came in the 1940s and 1950s. That's when the SA models came around. And then in the 1950s, the Dynactin models were introduced. And before I go on any further, I want to say hello to Brad Lely. Brad, thank you for tuning in. Brad is one of our Keilwerth artists. Of course, he teaches at the University of North Texas and also played with the Count Basie Orchestra for many, many years. And Brad, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about Keilwerth saxophones very shortly. So Buffet saxophones, 1950s, really got on the map as far as professional saxophones go with the Dynactin model. The Dynactin really kind of changed things for the perception of Buffet saxophones. They were fantastic instruments. Those segued into the Super Dynactin saxophones. The Super Dynactin saxophones are arguably the most famous professional saxophone that Buffet Crampon made, especially in the 1960s. It competed directly with many of the other famous French brands and was regarded as an equal to a lot of those models that were coming out of France. And they're fantastic instruments. I actually have an old Super Dynactin Alto in my office. I wish I could show it to you today, but unfortunately it's in our office in quarantine. But it is a wonderful instrument. The Super Dynactin saxophones were notable for many things, but one of the things that a lot of people notice or associate with the Super Dynactin model was the sparkle lacquer. And it varied from instrument to instrument, but a lot of the instruments that you will see, there's actually a little sparkle put in the lacquer of the instrument, and it gives it kind of a glimmer depending on how the light hits it. It's really a striking, beautiful effect that you see on the lacquer. And those instruments continued production well into the 1970s. And again, were considered one of the leading professional saxophones in production in the world. Once the Super Dynactins went out of production, there was a little bit of a transitional phase, and that was a transition into the S1 models. The S1 models are also considered to be fantastic instruments, the S1 and the S1 Prestige. And those instruments featured a really interesting design component with the pinky keys. When we talk about the pinky keys, we're talking about the E flat and C pinky on the right hand, and then the spatula keys on the left hand. Of particular note was the design on the pinky keys on the right hand. They didn't have rollers. They actually had pivoting paddles. And it was something that was unique to the industry and was really kind of groundbreaking in terms of the design. Unfortunately, it was very difficult and very expensive to maintain that production. And eventually the design of those keys went back to the traditional roller design that we see on all modern saxophones. But it was really a very cool design and really unique to the professional saxophone market, and a really great idea, actually. So the S1 Prestige was also notable because it was the first instrument to introduce a copper body. Copper, up to that point, had not really been used as a material for making saxophones. Of course, saxophones are made primarily out of brass, and you would see silver plating or you would see gold plating. And this was the first time a mainstream instrument was made out of a copper body. And it really produced a beautiful, sweet, smooth, dark sound. And it was something that has stayed with our professional saxophones through the Senzo model, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So the S1 and the S3 came along. Copper bodies, those were in production through the 1970s and into the 1980s. And then Buffet kind of took a break from professional saxophones for a few years. Fast forward to the mid-2000s. And this was about the time that I joined Buffet Crampon USA, 2006. Before I continue, I'm keeping an eye on our comment section. It's great to see so much participation. I'd like to say hello to Keilwerth artist Don Zentz. Thank him for joining us. Don is actually here in Jacksonville, Florida. He is the Jazz Studies Director at the Douglas Anderson School for the Arts here in Jacksonville, and is also the first call lead alto player in this area. And Don and I get to work together a lot professionally, and he is also a big advocate for Buffet and Keilwerth saxophone. So Don, it's great to have you tuning in. Thanks for participating, and let us know if you have any questions or comments you'd like to drop in as well. And there's Mike Smith. Mike Smith is joining us from Chicago. Of course, Mike Smith is kind of Mr. Keilwerth. Mike played lead alto for Frank Sinatra and then Frank Sinatra Jr. for years and years. One of the most prominent saxophonists in the Chicago scene. and plays Keilwerth and has played Keilwerth for many, many years. And Mike was also very heavily involved in the design of Buffet's re-entry into the professional saxophone market in the mid-2000s. Mike, your timing was great because we're going to talk about the 100 and 400 series saxophones from Buffet. In 2006, again, this is about the time that I joined Buffet Crampon USA here in Jacksonville, we introduced a new line of saxophones, the 100 series student saxophones and the 400 series professional saxophones. And these saxophones were different in design and different in scope and approach than what we had done previously. Up to that point, the Buffet Crampon professional saxophones had been made in France. This was our first venture into production in China. And again, Mike Smith was heavily involved in the design of these instruments. He actually traveled to China to work on the research and development of the 100 series and the 400 series. And these saxophones have been hugely successful since their introduction in 2006. The 100 series saxophones, unfortunately, I don't have one here to show you, but I can show you some of the design elements on my 400 series saxophone, which I have here. The important thing about the student saxophones, the 100 series student saxophones, especially if you are a band director tuning in this afternoon or this evening or this morning, depending on where you are, you're looking for a student saxophone that is not only going to be very durable, but you also want something that is going to play great and play in tune and be a great starter instrument for young players in 5th or 6th grade, whenever band students start in your area. And so you want to know that the instrument is not going to impede their progress. They're not going to have to fight that instrument. They're going to be able to make progress with the instrument helping them, not hindering. And that's what the 100 series student saxophones from Buffet Crampon do. Fantastic instruments. Number one, the thing that I love to talk about these instruments first is that they're built like tanks. They're very, very well built instruments. They're very, very durable. They're very, in terms of the weight of the instrument, they feel heavier than what you find with the other student instruments from other manufacturers. And I think that's very important, not only in terms of, well, it's a heavier instrument for a young student to play. It's made out of very high quality brass. And that's important for a number of reasons. Number one, the durability that we've been talking about with these instruments up to this point. The instruments are going to hold up very, very well over time. We know that young saxophone players maybe sometimes don't take the best care of their instruments. These instruments are going to be able to handle a lot of the abuse and a lot of the handling of young players. I think just as important as the durability of the instruments has to do with the fact that because we have a high quality brass and a thick brass, that's going to give you a darker, more characteristic sound and a more uniform, even response. And I think that is very, very important for young players and for band directors' peace of mind, because of the fact that they know that the instrument is not going to be made out of a thin brass or a thin metal. It's going to hold up over time, and it's actually going to give a nice, dark, characteristic sound as opposed to a thin brass, which is going to give it a brighter sound and a more cutting, obnoxious sound that we really want to avoid when we're talking about a beginning band program. Another thing that I think is very, very important about the 100 series saxophones has to do with the design of the bow. Okay, when we talk about the bow, we're talking about this U joint down at the bottom of the instrument. And this was one of the things that I learned about when I first joined the company in 2006, and I was learning about the research and the development of the 100 series and the 400 series saxophones, is that a decision was made to make this bow section right here a little bit larger. Now, why is that important? Okay, if you're a band director, or if you're a saxophone teacher, or if you know anything about beginning saxophone students, playing in the low register on alto saxophone is very, very challenging for younger players. You get a lot of turbulence down there because of the fact that those instruments, and we're talking about notes below low D, so we're talking about C sharp, C, B, and B flat. Those notes tend to be much more resistant for young players, not only because of the fact that the bow with most instruments is too small, but you also have that right turn that you have at the bottom of the instrument. So the tube has gotten much longer by the time you get to this part of the instrument. So by making the bow section on the 100 series and the 400 series saxophone a little bit larger, that gets rid of some of the turbulence on the instrument, and it makes for response of those low notes much easier. And I think that's a really, really big factor when you're talking about a beginning saxophone for a student. And for a band director, because the student is going to have success a little more quickly with those low notes. A couple of other things about the 100 series and the 400 series saxophones that I think is very, very important is the ribbed construction that we have on these instruments. What is ribbed construction? Okay, there are two different types of design when we're talking about saxophone design. We're talking about saxophones that have rib construction, and then we have saxophones that have post-to-body construction. And they're different approaches. One's not necessarily better than the other, but we're talking about different needs and different acoustic responses and different durability factors. And the decision was made to use the rib construction on the 100 series student saxophone. Let's see if I can show you an example of a rib construction. I don't know if we can see it on this webcam, but you can see the posts. If I can get my hand out of the way. See, the posts are all on one metal plate. That's referred to as a rib. Why is that important? If the instrument is dropped, if it's bumped, that post and that damage, the energy from the banging of the instrument or the dropping of the instrument, is going to be distributed along that post. And that's very important because that's going to distribute that energy throughout the body tube, and the damage to the instrument is not going to be nearly as severe. And for a student saxophone, that is terribly important. You'll see a lot of other student saxophones that have post-to-body construction. If they take a hit on one of the posts like that, all that energy from hitting that post goes directly into the body tube, and often the damage is much more severe. So that's why we think it's very important to have the rib construction, especially on the student saxophone. The response for the 100 series student saxophones has been tremendous. I've been following the comment thread here, and Tracy Morris here in Jacksonville, Florida is also chiming in. Tracy, it's good to see you and hear from you. Tracy runs a fantastic music academy here in Jacksonville, and he teaches a lot of saxophone students. Tracy is also a fantastic saxophone player and teacher. And Tracy, if you saw in his comment earlier, let's see if I can find it here, commented that he has a lot of his students playing the 100 series student saxophones. They're fantastic, well-made instruments. Tracy, thank you so much for that feedback, and thank you for your support. It's great to hear that your students are doing well with those instruments and that they're having a lot of success with those instruments as well. While we're taking a break talking about product information, I also want to say hello to Russell Kirk. Russell is one of our Buffet Crampon saxophone artists. He plays the 400 series Lacquer alto. Russ was a fixture in the New York scene for many, many years and is now in Maryland, playing around Baltimore. Fantastic saxophone player, fantastic teacher and educator, and it is great to see Russ joining us this afternoon. Russ, we miss you as well, and we hope you and your family are doing well, my friend. So let's get back to talking about Buffet saxophones and the re-entry into the market in 2006 with the 100 series and the 400 series saxophones. As I mentioned earlier, this is my personal 400 series alto sax. And this is actually a gold-plated saxophone, believe it or not. I'm going to take these earbuds out because I don't need them. This is a 400 series gold-plated instrument. This is not an instrument that we offer in the regular catalog, but we do offer a gold lacquer instrument, and we offer a matte finish instrument. We have two finishes that we offer with all of the 400 series saxophones. So for the alto, the tenor, and the baritone, my personal tenor is a matte finish tenor, which I'll show you in just a second. But we narrowed those finishes down because we felt like those two finishes offered the best color palette, tone palette that people were looking for in saxophones. The lacquer, of course, is a more traditional finish that you're going to see, especially with classical players. The matte finish was going to be a little more of kind of a hip offering and something that gave it a little more of a vintage look. A lot of people think that the matte finish instrument is an unlacquered instrument. It's actually not. It's actually 2 layers of finish. Let me grab the tenor for you so we can take a look at that. Hold on just a second. Okay, so here's my matte finish tenor. I actually just got this instrument earlier this year. It's a fantastic instrument. I love it. So this is not a raw brass finish. This is actually a matte finish, and it's actually 2 layers of finish on the instrument. There's a dark layer that's put on the instrument, on the body tube and on the keywork. And then there's a light layer on top of it, that matte layer that you see here. Now, if you can look closely, and again, I don't know if you can see this on a webcam, but you can see how there's some shadowing, especially on the side keys here. And so the dark layer is kind of bled through the light layer to give it that kind of vintage look. And I think it's a really hip look. The reason I like it personally is not so much because of the appearance of the instrument, even though I think it does look very cool. The reason I like it is, for me, when I play tenor, I really like a dark, smooth sound. And this instrument with this finish gives me that sound that I'm looking for on tenor, both classical and jazz playing. And it really works very, very well. For me, the matte finish personally on alto and baritone was a little bit too dark and a little bit covered. But for tenor, it works beautifully. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize, especially classical players, when they look at the matte finish, they automatically assume that it's a commercial or a jazz finish. When in reality, that extra layer of finish that you see on this instrument gives the instrument more of a darker sound and works very, very well for classical playing. Before everything changed with the pandemic and everything started getting suspended or postponed or canceled, I was at the North American Saxophone Alliance conference in Tempe, Arizona. It's the biannual conference that they have every 2 years. It's the biggest gathering of saxophonists in North America. And there are a lot of classical players that attend this conference. And I always enjoy meeting with classical players to have them try the matte finish, because when they first see that finish, they assume it's a jazz finish, or they assume that it's a raw finish and that the instrument is going to be too bright for what they're looking for in a classical sound. And then I have them play it, and their eyes always get very big. They're always very surprised by what they get out of the instrument, sound-wise and response-wise. It's something that they really like, and they're really pleasantly surprised that they're able to get out of the instrument. So the 2 finishes that we offer for the 400 series are the lacquer finish and the matte finish. And again, one's not better than the other. I think it has to do with a personal preference. I think it's what you're looking for. For me, as a classical and jazz player, on alto and baritone, I prefer a lacquer finish. On tenor, I prefer a matte finish because that gives me more of the sound that I'm looking for, the sound concept that I have on tenor. Francois Biacard, it's good to hear from you. Joining us from France and Buffet Crampon, France. He's joining in and contributing a little bit of humor. The matte finish has nothing to do with my name, unfortunately, but that's a very good observation. Thank you, Francois. Also good to hear from Aaron Hedenstrom. Aaron is one of our Keilwerth artists in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And if you tuned into Keilwerth, or if you tuned into Aaron's personal page last night, he just did a wonderful masterclass on a recording that he contributed a week or 2 ago. An wonderful arrangement that Aaron did. You should really check it out. If you haven't checked out his personal page, be sure to do that. Aaron Hedenstrom is a wonderful Keilwerth artist for us in Minneapolis. He's a University of North Texas graduate. He's also a former student of Brad Lely at UNT as well. So Aaron, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Some of you know that I play a lot of baritone saxophone. Bari is probably my main instrument. Like all professional saxophone players, I have to play all the different models, but Bari is really kind of my thing and has been for many, many years. It's going to be interesting to try and get my Bari in the shot here. But this is my personal 400 series baritone, and I love this horn. This horn is just about the best Bari I've ever played, and I'll tell you why. The thing that I love about this baritone sax more than anything else, and there are many things that I love about this Barry, is the tuning on the instrument. The tuning on this instrument is the best tuning on a professional baritone sax that I have ever played. I have played a lot of Barrys. I've owned a lot of Barrys. I owned some vintage baritones that when I would get in the upper register, when I would get up around high D, E flat, E, F, I would have to use short fingerings because the instrument played so sharp. This instrument, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about using fake fingerings. I don't have to worry about using short fingerings. When I play in the upper register on this baritone, it plays in tune. And that is such a relief and such a great thing to be able to have that security as a baritone player, that you don't have to worry about those instruments or those notes playing out of tune. And I love this instrument. I was just watching the comment section. Lauren Sevian, of course, is one of our baritone artists based in New York. If you weren't with us earlier during our session, Lauren is based in New York. She plays with the Mkx Band, one of the hottest Barry players on the New York scene today. Lauren plays a lacquer instrument like this one. Lauren actually played a matte finish instrument for a while, if you saw in her comment a few minutes ago. And she had a similar comment that I was saying regarding the matte finish versus the lacquer finish. For Lauren, if she felt like that instrument played a little too dark for what she was looking for the sound and for the cut that she's trying to get out of her Barry sound. And I agree as well. That's I played on a matte finish Barry for a while, but I switched back over to lacquer Barry, this particular Barry, and I absolutely love it. If you're looking for a good Barry with a matte, or excuse me, with a classical sound, I just tipped my hand there, a matte finish Barry might be the ideal choice for you, because it really does give a very dark, almost cello-like sound that you get with the instrument. Same key work, same body tube, same everything, same fantastic tuning. It's really a wonderful instrument if you're looking for something that gives you a little darker sound than what you're going to get with a lacquer instrument as well. I'm going to take a quick water break. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in this afternoon. It's great to talk to you about Buffet Crampon saxophones and Keilwerth saxophones. It's great to have so many people tuning in this afternoon. I hope you're all healthy and well. We're going to talk about Julius Keilwerth saxophones in just a minute. There's one more model that we need to talk about with regards to Buffet Crampon saxophones, and that's the Senzo saxophone. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Senzo saxophone. We mentioned earlier that the 400 series was Buffet Crampon's re-entry into the professional saxophone market in 2006. However, the Senzo saxophone, which was introduced a couple of years ago, was the European professional high-end model re-entry into that professional saxophone world. The Senzo, and its name is actually from the Japanese for ancestor, is a copper body instrument. It is a direct descendant of the S1, the S3, and the Super Dynactin instruments, incorporating design elements from all three of those legacy models in the Buffet Crampon history of saxophones. But there have been improvements throughout the instrument in terms of tone hole placement, in terms of the addition of a resonance cavity on the neck. Unfortunately, I don't have a Senzo here that I can show you. I wish I did, because they're such wonderful instruments. But what I can tell you when we talk about a resonance cavity, and I'll show you on this 400 series alto here, is that there's a little bump right here. There are two different designs. There's one that goes pretty high and then one a little bit lower. And the resonance cavity on the on the Senzo professional saxophone has to do with the transition over the break on saxophone. As soon as I put it down, I got to pick it back up. When we talk about the break on the saxophone, what are we talking about? We're talking about the transition from open C sharp to middle D. So what happens as a saxophone player when we make that transition over the break, when we're going from C sharp to D? Well, we're going from a very open note on the saxophone. So basically, with all these keys open, the tube is about this long. When we go to middle D and we add that octave key, suddenly the tube is now this long. So what happens? A couple of things. Number one, we get a change in resistance. You get a very open resonant note with the open C sharp to a very resistant, more covered closed note with the middle D. So what's important about the resonance cavity with the Senzo saxophone is that that cavity at the base of the neck helps to minimize that timbre change over the break. It also helps minimize the resistance change from open C sharp to D. It's really a fantastic innovation that the acousticians in France came up with when they designed the Senzo. And again, there are two different models of that instrument, or excuse me, of that neck design that you can use. One is kind of a minimal design, and then one is much larger. One is not better than the other. It really has to do with a personal preference and what works better for you. Of course, the Senzo, as I mentioned earlier, has a copper body. It has lacquer keys. It's also available as a silver-plated instrument and as a lacquered instrument as well. A notable artist that plays the Senzo here in the United States on the classical side is Preston Duncan. Preston teaches at the University of Minnesota. Wonderful, wonderful classical player and teacher. Was one of the featured performers and presenters at the NASA conference in Arizona earlier this month. Preston has been playing the Senzo for several years now and is a fantastic advocate for that instrument, and we are so thrilled to have him playing the Senzo for us. On the jazz side, and this brings up a very good point that I always like to talk about with the Senzo. When people are first introduced to the Senzo saxophone, the assumption is that it is a classical instrument only, and that could be further from the truth. The Senzo saxophone is a professional saxophone that can be played for classical or jazz. And Alex Terrier is proof of that. Alex Terrier is one of our saxophone artists in the New York scene. He's both a Buffet Crampon and Keilwerth saxophone artist. And Alex plays the Senzo alto saxophone. And he plays a silver-plated version. So it's silver plating on top of the copper body. And if you've ever heard Alex play, you know that the Senzo is not just a classical saxophone. So if you have the opportunity to play a Senzo saxophone, right now they're available exclusively through SaxQuest in St. Louis, Missouri, and also available with Schmidt Music in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I strongly encourage you to check out one of those saxophones. They are wonderful, wonderful instruments, worthy of the Buffet Crampon heritage. The bodies are made in France, and then the final assembly is done at our factory in Germany. So the Senzo Alto has been available for a few years. I get a lot of questions about the Senzo expanding beyond the alto voice. Is there going to be a tenor Senzo? Is there going to be a soprano Senzo or a baritone? The answer is a soprano and tenor are in development, which I'm very, very excited about. I don't know when we're going to have prototypes for those instruments to check out. I saw that Gregory Demaillet is joining us from France. He's the Woodwind product manager for the Buffet Crampon group. Greg, it's great to have you tuning in this afternoon. Greg and I talk quite a bit, and he keeps me updated on what's going on with the development of the Senzo Soprano and Tenor. All I can tell you at this point is that they are working on a soprano and tenor for the Senzo. Again, I don't know when those are going to be put into production or when we're going to see the first prototypes. Hopefully it will be very soon, though, because if the tenor or the soprano is anything like the alto, we're in for a real treat. Those are going to be fantastic saxophones. So I'm looking at the comments here, and Hayden, I hope that answered your question about the Senzo Soprano and Tenor. Hayden Fallick joining us this afternoon. Chris Kimura is joining us from Texas. Chris, it's great to see you joining us. Chris is one of our Keilwerth artists in Austin, Texas, and it's great to see him. I hope you're healthy and well, and appreciate you joining us this afternoon and for your support of Keilwerth saxophones. Speaking of Keilwerth saxophones, let's get into Keilwerth saxophones now. And again, all the Keilwerth artists that have joined us this afternoon, really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come in to support us and to see us and to talk about Keilwerth and Buffet Crampon saxophones. So Keilwerth saxophones, a little more recent brand than Buffet Crampon. Keilwerth was officially started in 1925. Julius Keilwerth, the namesake of the brand, actually apprenticed for the Kohler Company in Grozlitz, Czechoslovakia. And he and his brother Max established a workshop in their house. They did that about 1925 and really got into production of the saxophones. They were actually considered one of the largest saxophone manufacturers in Europe right around the start of World War II. They employed about 150 factory workers. And after the war was completed, they moved their headquarters to Nauheim, Germany, and of course now Keilwerth production is in Marknenkirchen, Germany, near the Czech border. So let's talk about the models of Keilwerth. There have been many models of Keilwerth over the years, and a lot of stencils too. A lot of people get curious about the stencils, the stencil history behind Keilwerth. And the most common one that people are familiar with are the H. Cuff saxophones, which became very popular in the 60s through the 1980s. Herb Cuff was a very prominent saxophone teacher in the United States, and he imported Keilwerth saxophones under his name. So when you see a H. Cuff saxophone, the most common models are the Superba 1, boy, I'm really killing that, and Superba 2, those are Keilwerth instruments. And a lot of other names that were stencil instruments, but they were all Keilwerth instruments. They were all made by Keilwerth. You see a lot of Tone King models floating around. You see a lot of Imperial models floating around as well. One thing that a lot of people don't realize about Keilwerth is that Keilwerth also produced trumpets for a limited amount of time. They actually produced the Tone King 3000. And my high brass product specialist, Warren Coos, my colleague, has one of these Keilwerth trumpets. It's really cool. And we were actually surprised to find those instruments as well. So Keilwerth dabbled a little bit in trumpets, but then got out of it soon afterwards. Mike Smith is also reminding me about the Bundy Keilwerth saxophones. Keilwerth made saxophones under the Bundy name in the 1960s, and it may have gone all the way back to 1950s. I'm actually not sure. And a lot of people associate the Bundy name with a student saxophone, but they were actually terrific instruments. And I actually saw a Bundy Keilwerth baritone saxophone here in Jacksonville just a couple of weeks ago. A guy had it. It was a really interesting instrument. So sometimes when you'll see a Bundy instrument, if you look on the back of that instrument, if you see a Made in Germany stamp on the instrument, that's a Keilwerth stencil. That's an instrument that was made by Keilwerth, which a lot of people don't really realize. As far as the modern models that are offered by Keilwerth, of course, the most famous model for Keilwerth that people associate with the brand is the SX90R. The SX90R is available in alto, tenor, and baritone models. There's also the SX90, which is available now in soprano, baritone, and bass saxophone models. What's the difference between SX90 and SX90R? Let me get a sip of water here. The biggest difference has to do with that R at the end of the model. When we talk about SX90R, we are talking about rolled tone holes. So I happen to have an SX90R vintage alto here with me. So the SX90R, again, the R indicates that it's an instrument that has rolled tone holes. What is a rolled tone hole? A rolled tone hole is a design concept, an acoustic concept that really became popular in the early 1900s here in the United States, believe it or not. A lot of the professional saxophones that were made in the United States featured rolled tone holes. And I'm going to attempt to show you a rolled tone hole on this alto here. If you take a look right there, you can see on the low B flat tone hole chimney or the low B tone hole chimney, there's a ring around that tone hole. That is an example of a rolled tone hole. So what exactly does a rolled tone hole do, and why is it significant on Keilwerth saxophones? A rolled tone hole accomplishes two things. It's an acoustic effect, and it's also a mechanical effect. What you see is the ring is actually soldered on top of that tone hole chimney. Now, in the early 1900s, this was literally a rolled tone hole. They would draw the chimney out of the bell, and then they would roll that metal over the tone hole. The modern design and production of this instrument is to where you take the ring and you solder it onto the top of that tone hole chimney. So it does two things. Number one, acoustically, it's going to give a little bit of a different response and a different sound. And this is something that Keilwerth saxophones are really noted for. The fact that when the sound exits the tone hole, and we'll use the low B and B flat again, when it exits the tone hole on a straight tone hole instrument, like what we saw with the 400 series saxophone earlier in the conversation, it exits the tone hole like this, pretty straight. So it's more of a direct sound. With a rolled tone hole, the sound is going to exit the tone hole more like this. It's going to give you a broader, bigger sound. It's not an unfocused sound, but it's a broader sound. It's a bigger sound. And that's what a lot of people really enjoy about the Keilwerth saxophones. Again, one's not better than the other. It's just a personal preference thing, and it's what people want to get out of their personal sound on saxophone. The other big thing when we talk about rolled tone holes has to do with how the pad sits on the tone hole. If we close the low B flat key on this instrument, you'll see how the tone hole, how the pad and the rolled tone hole interact. If you look at a more traditional French design with straight tone holes, you'll see that the edge of that tone hole chimney obviously doesn't have that rolled on the tone hole, but it's also much sharper. So the idea is that the rolled tone hole, in terms of pad durability, will be easier on the pad over time. Now, depending on the player, depending on the maintenance that the player does with the instrument, of course, those are all factors that are going to come into play as well. But those are the two big factors when we talk about rolled tone holes, and we talk about Keilwerth's place in the professional saxophone market and why that is such an important feature when it comes to Keilwerth saxophones. I see that we're getting a lot of questions about the finish of this particular instrument, and I'm glad you guys are asking those questions. It's very important when it comes to Keilwerth again. This is actually a vintage finish SX90R. There are 4 finish options for SX90R Keilwerth saxophones for the altos and tenors. There's a traditional rich gold lacquer. There's the black nickel finish. You'll see a lot of our artists play that particular finish. Ernie Watts plays a black nickel tenor SX90R. He's played it for years and years. It's got black nickel keys, and then it has a gold lacquer key work and bell wash. There's also the vintage finish, which you see here, and then there's the shadow finish. Let's talk about this vintage finish and how this look is achieved. I think this finish is fantastic. I love it. I think it's so cool looking, and it's why I got this instrument. This is actually what they do is they take the instrument and they put it in a chemical dip. This is at the factory in Martineukirchen, Germany. They put the instrument into this chemical dip. The chemical dip reacts with the raw brass, and they leave it in for a prescribed amount of time, and then they pull the instrument out. Every vintage saxophone is a unique instrument, meaning that the dip is going to react with the brass differently with every instrument. So every vintage saxophone that you see, every vintage model saxophone, is going to look a little bit different and unique. And I think that's a very cool thing about this instrument. The key work on this instrument is brushed nickel. So it gives it a real striking look when you pair it up with that vintage finish. I think it looks really, really cool, and it plays fantastic too. The shadow finish, which I talked about just a minute ago, is nickel silver, black nickel and then nickel silver. Again, it's a really striking looking instrument. A lot of our players prefer that finish because it gives a real cut of the sound. It's a really it's a bright sound while still retaining the core of the sound, and it really, really works well. If you want a finish that is really going to help you project and cut through, the shadow is one that really is popular with a lot of players. Don Zentz, our artist that is viewing in, Don has a set of shadow SX90Rs. His alto and tenor both have that finish and sound fantastic. So those are the finishes that we have with the SX90R. I saw artist Brad Leely mentioned earlier, he was asking about the Mkx model from Keilwerth. That is a model that we offered for several years. That model has been put out of production as of 2020 because we're focusing more of our resources and more of our labor on the SX90 and SX90R. The distinguishing feature about the Mkx saxophone is that it had kind of a combination of the German concept of sound with a French design. So the Mkx instruments actually had straight tone holes. They didn't have the rolled tone holes, but they had the larger bell, especially on the alto, and they were available in a gold lacquer or in a vintage finish, but the vintage finish was on the keywork and on the body. So it was known as the antique finish. And those are really terrific instruments as well. They're kind of a nice go-between the rolled tone hole sound and between the French design of the straight tone hole sound and the more focused sound. While we're talking about the Keilwerth saxophones and the SX90R, one other thing I failed to mention earlier, if we do a side-by-side comparison of these two instruments, one of the things that you'll see right away is the bell size and the bell flare. So over here is the Keilwerth SX90R. Here is the Buffet Crampon 400 series. And you can see with the Keilwerth that the bell flare is much larger and much more extreme on this instrument than what you see with a French design with the Buffet Crampon. Again, it's not one is better than the other. It's a personal preference thing. Keilwerth saxophones are notable, especially in the alto, for that big bell flare that you don't see quite as much on a French design instrument. As far as SX90 instruments go, we have available sopranos, baritones, and bass saxophones. We have 3 different finishes or different models when it comes to the sopranos. We have the gold lacquer SX90. We have the vintage finish SX90, so similar to the alto that I was just showing you a minute ago. So it has the chemical dip on the body and then the brushed nickel keywork. And then we also have the Dave Lehmann model. Of course, Dave is one of the icons in the jazz world, especially when it comes to soprano saxophone. And the Dave Lehmann model has the vintage finish with the brushed nickel keywork, but the keywork is a little different design, and Dave was involved in the design of the keywork, the design of the key shapes, the side keys, the palm keys on the left hand. And those are wonderful, wonderful instruments. Again, they have the vintage finish with the brushed nickel keywork. Depending on which model you get, if you get the signature model, you also get a custom case that comes with the Lehmann model. Beautiful case outfit. And those are all incorporating design elements from Dave Lehmann. And one of the really interesting things about the soprano, and I don't have one to show you here, or I would, unfortunately, is that you see that the bell flare on the soprano is a little more extreme when it flares out. It's almost it almost gives an English horn kind of sound to the soprano. It's a really, really cool sound, really unique sound, and they're wonderful, wonderful instruments. Again, the Dave Lehmann signature soprano, as well as the other SX90 sopranos. Let's talk about baritones for a second. SX90 and SX90 are baritones. We are one of the few manufacturers in the world that offers a low B flat baritone. And I always get very excited about these baritones because they're such wonderful instruments, and they play much differently than a low A baritone. Of course, most of the professional baritone saxophones that you see available today are keyed to low A. And that's because most of the literature, whether you're talking about big band literature, or you're talking about show literature, or even classical literature, is that you're required to have that low A key. Low B flat baritones, on the other hand, play very differently. They're not as resistant. They're freer blowing than what you get with a low A baritone. Of course, if you've seen a lot of some of the older players, they play low B flat baritones, and actually a lot of players in New York play low B flat baritones now. One of our Keilwerth artists, rest in peace, Nick Brignola, played a low B flat black nickel baritone and sounded fantastic. If you know anything about Nick Brignola's playing, he really put that instrument to the test, and it took it. So we do have a low B flat baritone saxophone available. And again, they're wonderful instruments. Chris is chiming in. He's got a low B flat black nickel. I didn't know that, Chris. That's fantastic. Those instruments are so terrific and play so well. I love low B flat berries. Of course, Keilwerth does make low A berries as well, which are wonderful instruments. If you need that low A for show work or for big band work, that's available for you as well. And you can get either rolled tone hole baritones, or you can get straight tone hole baritones. We do also make a bass saxophone. One of the few manufacturers in the world that still makes bass saxophones. It's the SX90, the JK5300. It's a gold lacquer instrument. It is keyed from low B flat up to high E flat. A lot of the same design elements of the early 1900 American bass saxophones that were in production. A lot of the inspiration for the Keilwerth bass comes from the early American bass saxophones, and they're really terrific instruments. I would love to have one, actually, but don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But they're really, really fantastic instruments, and they are available for those of you that are interested in bass saxophones. We're getting close to the end of the hour. It has been so fantastic having the input and the participation from the comments thread. I apologize if I didn't get to your question. I will let you know that if you do have additional questions, you can email me directly. I would love to hear from you. I will put my email address in the comment thread when we conclude this broadcast. It's matt.vance@buffetcrampon.com. And again, I will put that in the comment thread if you would like to reach out to me and ask me any more questions about our saxophones or any of our woodwind instruments. I would love to talk about that. Before we go, I'm going to duck down. Excuse me one second. Sorry, I know that was more personal than you probably wanted to be. I want to remind you about our upcoming sessions, our hashtag Together at Home sessions that are being brought to you by Buffet Crampon USA. We're going to be continuing these sessions through the end of April, and we're also going to be extending these sessions into May. And we'll have an announcement on the schedule for those sessions coming up a little bit later this month. I invite you to join us on the Antoine Courtois Facebook page on Tuesday, April 21st. Low brass product specialist Declan Lynch will be joining us to talk about the Creation Series trombones. The New York Creation Series trombones, the tenor and bass trombones, were designed in conjunction with our artists in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, Weston Sprott and Denson Paul Pollard. We may have a special guest joining us during that session. That will be next Tuesday, the 21st at 2 o'clock Eastern on the Antoine Courtois Facebook page. Then next Thursday, high brass product specialist Warren Coos will be joining us on the Hans Hoyer Facebook page. He'll be talking about French horns, specifically the Heritage Series, and he'll be doing a question and answer session on Hans Hoyer French horns. I will be back with you on Tuesday, April 28th. I'll be joined by New York showroom manager Lori Orr and professional double reed sales manager. We'll be doing a discussion of Buffet Crampon, Reguta, and Schreiber double reeds. So we'll get into Buffet Crampon oboes and English horns. We'll get into Raguta oboes and English horns, and we'll talk about Schreiber bassoons and contrabassoons. So that will be Tuesday, April 28th at 2 o'clock Eastern on the Buffet page. And then finally, we'll be moving over to the Besson Brass Facebook page on Thursday, April 30th. High brass product specialist Warren Coos will be back with us. Warren is also an avid brass band performer and supporter. He'll be talking about the legacy of Besson Brass in the brass band world and the British brass band world. Warren also has extensive experience as a brass band performer, a solo cornetist, and he'll offer his insight into British brass bands in North America, as well as his experience as a British brass band member. I would like to thank all of you for joining me this afternoon. Of course, this video will be archived on the Buffet Crampon Facebook page. So if you joined us late or if you had to miss any of it, it will be up shortly. You'll be able to review that. Again, I will put my email address in the comments section if you would like to contact me directly. I would love to hear from you. Love hearing from so many of our artists today and so many people from around the world and around the United States. I hope all of you are healthy and safe. Please continue practicing social distancing and wash your hands. And we will look forward to seeing you next Tuesday with Declan Lynch on the Antoine Courtois Facebook page to discuss Creation Series trombones. Everybody take care, and we'll see you soon.